Hello, this is Brooks Whittington with halfwheel.com. Today we're taking a look at the 360 Scissors Cutter by Elie Bleu. Now, the French accessory company showed off this new cutter design during the 2022 PCA Convention and Trade Show. As you can see, it is a completely circular design, and there are a total of 4 different finishes for this cutter. Silver with gold button, gold pinstripe, silver pinstripe, which this is right here, and a black IP. Now, the price for all four finishes is the same, $290. All right, so now in terms of physical specs, the 360 Scissor by Elie Bleu is a double guillotine cutter. Now, it's a fairly unique design, obviously, as it's opened and closed using massive finger openings, as you see here. In fact, some of the largest I've seen on a cutter. As for the double guillotine cutter aspect, the 360 is designed with 2 handles, which are connected via a single hinge you see here, that when open reveals the 2 blades. Now, when the cutter is closed, these handles are held together by a very ingenious magnetic closure system. As you see right here, there's a magnet right there. And so when you close that, it just locks in place. And it works very, very well. We'll get to that in a minute. Now, the cigar cutter can cut up to 68 ring gauge cigars, according to the company, and I found that to be true, with no problems at all cutting, larger ring gauge cigars. In fact, I was able to cut up to about a 70 pretty easily. Bodies are made entirely of steel, while the blades are made of hardened surgical steel. Cutter weighs 81 grams and is only 0.2 inches thick, like this. Total diameter of 2.75 inches when it's closed, and a total length of 4 inches when it is fully open, like so. All right, enough of that. Let's cut some cigars. Now, as I mentioned before, the 360 is a double guillotine cutter, albeit a very uniquely designed one. And it works pretty much the same as any other double guillotine cutter on the market. However, there are some things that you can do to make sure that you get the best cuts possible while using this cutter. And one of those things that you can do is to give yourself as much stability as you possibly can. And basically the way you do that is by putting your thumb into the right opening, or opposite if you're left-handed, and you put your middle finger and your ring finger in the left opening. However, you put your index finger on the top here, and you put your pinky on the bottom. And that gives you that really, really great stability to actually use the cutter in the most effective way. You then take the cap of the cigar here, you put it into that opening, and you can open it up, as you see, fairly wide for those larger ring gauges. And you can see a lot of what you're cutting, most of what you're cutting basically, out of that, from the other end of the cap. And you can actually push through very, very easily and see exactly what you're cutting. Now, there's also the cool thing about the magnetic closure system, as you see here, as I mentioned, works very, very well to keep that cutter closed. All right, now is the time of the review. I go through some good things and bad things. Good things I loved, bad things that necessarily I didn't like about this cutter. Now, the first thing I have to mention is just the design. The actual look of the 360 by Elie Bleu is just amazing. It's got an amazing, attention to detail, unique design, uses high-end materials, and it looks great when you're actually using it. It's a showpiece for sure, and it looks like it. It looks like something that you pick up and actually, it's just wonderful looking visually. Of course, it also comes with the idea that you have these designed, these larger finger holes, which allow me, specifically larger guy, to use the cutter very, very easily. Now, that doesn't mean that smaller people with smaller hands can't use the cutter. I'm sure that they can, but certainly it's a great design element to be able to put my fingers into this openings and not have to stuff them into a smaller opening. Secondly, you've got the cuts. The cuts from this cigar cutter are wonderful. Everything from a Lancero to a 70 ring gauge, I had no issues with whatsoever. And that's certainly not a given when you're talking about expensive cutters, I assure you. It's not something to take for granted. And this is something that you can use on pretty much any cigar. In fact, out of the testing that I did, only 4 cigars out of 51 had minor issues when I was actually cutting these cigars. It does what it's supposed to do, and that is certainly a positive. Finally, you've got the magnetic closure system, which is very, very cool and works like a charm. You can see here, you've got this magnet right on the end here. And what it does is it keeps that this specific blade here, this end, closed completely. It does never came open when I was picking it up or anything of that nature. It takes a little bit of force to open it up, but it's not enough to actually be annoying or anything of that nature. It's enough to keep it closed all the time, not enough to become annoying when you're actually opening it. It's extremely well designed and a great feature for this cutter. All right, now having said that, there are some, not so great things that I really didn't like about the cutter, albeit fairly minor in scope. First thing is the size is very noticeable, very obvious, and very large. The diameter is extremely large, and there was never a time when I was carrying this around in my pocket that I didn't know it was not there. It's very obvious. And while it wasn't so annoying that I stopped carrying it around in my pocket, it's definitely got to very, very close to that. In fact, if you see here, I've got an Inso, Zycar Inso here. In the same shape, and you can see here when I put them on top, put the Inso on top, just how much bigger that Inso, that 360 is compared to that Inso. Now the 360 is thinner, no doubt about that, but it's also heavier, and that Inso is lighter, and it's a significant difference in weight and in bulkiness in terms of the diameter of the actual cutter. So something to think about if you carry around your cutter everywhere you go in your pocket. Now, number 2, this cutter should come with a case, which Elie Bleu doesn't even sell for this cutter. I think it needs a case because the cutter's mirror finish shows scratches and fingerprints, just absolutely every single one of them. It's so hard to keep clean. You could clean it every time you picked it up, I guess, but honestly, it is just not something that you'd want to do. It's difficult to actually, pick this thing up and not have some, evidence that you did that. And there are minor scratches you see up and down here. There's some minor scratches on the actual finish. And honestly, I'm gonna give them props here because I thought it'd be worse. I carried this thing around in my pocket with keys and change, and it just I thought there'd be some major scratches, and there aren't. So kudos to them. Having said that, unless you want to keep, wipe it off every single time you use it. And so in the end, can I recommend the 360 scissor by Elie Bleu? The answer is yes. Now, look, $290 is a lot of money to spend on a cigar cutter. No doubt about that. But there's a lot of aspects that actually make this cutter worth the money if you're looking to spend that much. It's definitely designed well. It's visually stunning. It uses high quality materials, and perhaps most importantly, it actually cuts cigars very, very well. Certainly not a given when it comes to more expensive cigar cutters. There are some minor issues, having to keep it clean every time, and the size, the bulk, the diameter is definitely something that you want to keep in mind if you are, carrying it around a lot. However, this is a showpiece cutter, and it looks like a showpiece cutter, and it's going to cost the same as a showpiece cutter should. The difference is that this cigar cutter actually cuts cigars very, very well, and definitely something that you should look into if that is the type of cutter that you're looking for. For halfwheel.com, this is Brooks Whittington. For all of your cigar review and news needs, go to halfwheel.com.